Greetings. I'm excited about welcoming you to this edition of Leadership Perspectives. The focus of this conversation was school climate and culture. We were fortunate to hear from Ms. Shakira Abney-Wisdom. At the time of filming, she was about 1 month into her second year as the founding principal of a new high school in Denver, Colorado. The school opened the year before with 9th grade students only and was serving 9th and 10th grade students in the year of filming. I found her beliefs and values to be compelling. I hope you're also able to find guidance and inspiration in her messages. This is Shakira's Leadership Perspective. What's yours?
I'm Shakira Abney-Wisdom, the founding principal of Robert F. Smith STEAM Academy. I've had an opportunity to have many different roles in education, from Jumpstart, which is an AmeriCorps program, teaching reading to young learners, to City Year, being in the founding core here in Denver. I was a classroom teacher after I was a teacher resident. Then I was a teacher leader, a principal resident, and now have the opportunity to serve in the role as principal. Worked in higher ed as an adjunct professor, but also kind of alongside of a dean of school education and in government, both local and state. So lots of different roles that compound to help me lead the work that I get to lead today.
So for the first question, just wondering, when you think about school climate and culture, and you could use whichever term you feel is more appropriate or more functional for you. But what's important to you personally and professionally when it comes to school climate and culture? So kind of, that's a broad question, and then we'll get a little more discreet as we go. Yeah, what's important to you?
Authenticity is the most important. Without being genuine, there's no real way to gauge where we're starting and to create a baseline. After participating in an AVID training, it was shared culture is what you allow. And I think creating space for people to be their full selves is helpful, while also giving parameters for what it looks like to show up in the space. I think anything that is unhinged becomes unsafe. So managing the authenticity, but also other awareness is also necessary. So one of the norms that I've led my team and my staff with this year in particular is to be hot. So humble, open, and transparent. That way we are able to connect with one another, to vulnerably say, this is what I need, this is what I'm good at, and this is where I'm struggling. Or if we said we are going to do X, then this needs to happen, and to have that tension between the three. Because if we are open and transparent without being humble, we come across as brash and can hurt other people. If we are just humble without being transparent, we don't express what it is that we fully need in order to fulfill our mission. And so always writing our various perspectives against our shared goal is important. This year, we crafted a shared why as a staff. And that shared why is a part of everyone's signature. I've coined it as, this is an opportunity to communicate with people who don't know us, why it is that we work in the school where we work. And now, once we send that first email, it's up to us to deliver on what we said we came to do. But just those landmarks within the work are really important, because it's what builds trust, so long as we're consistent. It's what builds safety as well, but allowing people to be their full selves within the context of professionalism and the context of our roles, which again is channeled back to our shared why.
Thank you. That's really gives a great feel for the question I asked, which is what's important to you, and you gave some specific examples. You mentioned that when this culture is in action, this ideal culture that you're talking about, that a couple of things you would see would be increased trust and then a feeling of safety. What else? Let's think about, like, just as you walk your school, the school where you lead, you're seeing things and you're also feeling things. What else do you see and feel when the culture is tuned in to what you want? And what do you see and feel when the culture is starting to diverge from what's expected?
When it's tuned in, kids are absolutely safe to be their full selves. You see a different level of creativity and innovation in the way that they even think about problems that are presented to them. and they're able to isolate patterns and connections just in different ways, either between themselves and the work that they're doing. But it's even more beautiful when they're able to see connections between one another and across lines of difference and even similarity. When it's not aligned, there are moments where people respond in a way that is clearly a way to protect themselves, right? There's a level of stress and also a need to be seen as, right? I need to project an image that we think is what people are looking for, when the reality is, as the leader, I'm just looking for where you truly are, not where you want to be or think I want you to be. Because I often tell teachers when they're frustrated or struggling, and even kids, like, my job is to come up with solutions. So if I'm only presented with problems, but not what you've tried, I can't give you a response, or we can't work together to figure out what will be best. I can just breed more frustration, truthfully. So just asking people to step behind the veil, step away from what they think they need to be seen as, which can be really uncomfortable, particularly working with adults, right? We have experiences that have been developed, muscle memory or even trauma responses in some cases. So it becomes very difficult to regulate again, even when the stakes are lower, even when it's communicated that people are safe. One thing that I'm learning is, as I navigate my role as a leader, I have to also recognize that I'm combating people's experiences with other leaders who might not have the similar approach as I do, or may have used similar approaches with a different motive. So that also brings up responses for people. So it's a balance of saying what's needed in the work that we're doing together, but also repeating myself, which is something I have to become more comfortable with as a person who's like, what's the thing that we're doing? Let's just do it. But I'm recognizing and seeing how saying the same things over and over again gives people an opportunity to spend more time with the ideas that I've spent a lot of time with and get on board with them.
Talk for a moment about what you're doing. You're doing many things for student climate and culture. So for sure, we're not going to articulate all 100 and whatever things you're doing. But what are a few of those kind of bigger impact items that you do that are systematic around student climate and culture?
The most impactful aspect of our scholar culture is our student council. And so creating a space for our kids to have efficacy and autonomy, and understanding the context, even for their frustrations or disagreements. It was really cool last year to see kids be like, why do we have to do this? And I'm like, you can create the policy, but I will give you the parameters. You need to consider these 6 or 7 or 8 things, and then give me your idea. And there were times where like, oh, never mind. Like, it makes sense why you told us that we have to do this. So as we're going into this year, we're looking to start student council a lot earlier and have representatives from both of our classes, based on some of the concerns around safety and just general maturity of where our kids were last year. Last year was very unique in the sense that we, at the beginning, received kids who were in 9th grade, but socially in some aspects were still in middle school because they had not been with one another or with educators in a space with clarity and structure. So there was a lot of growth that happened last year, and wanting to maintain that momentum and also eliminate some variability that could decrease potentially safety, looked to create structure. And I think in response to structure where you have license to do whatever, there is typically a negative response to that. And so what I have pivoted my kids' frustration into is like, are you upset about our cell phone policy? Are you upset about these things? Then the space for you to figure out how a solution is to be a part of student council, and being able to leverage that, not just as a way to invalidate their frustrations, but to say, I want you to take a stand and create policy that honors the parameters that we have to honor and also creates a level of freedom that you're looking for. And it functions as a class, right? So they earn high school credit to be a part of that. And then they become the first line of recruitment. So now we'll have two branches this year. One will be like the policy side, where they're looking at like off-campus lunch and cell phones and tardies and hall passes. Like, what's the best way for them to get the feedback of parents, of other kids, of staff, of what's the best solution to those problems. And then a community facing branch, which would be community service projects, middle school and 8th grade recruitment, like a community presence. So expanding that to allow them to be able to say, this is what we believe in, and this is where we want to go, with the ultimate goal of our kids establishing their own student board of education. So really shifting and shaping policy that happens at the school level, but then also at the district level, to be able to give voice to and movement to not just their frustrations, but their ideas and solutions. So there's lots of moving pieces and organizations within the district, within the community, that are part of that work. But I think that is all encompassing. They do spirit weeks. They plan the carnival at the end of this school year, the field trip. They did a lot of things that student council doesn't always get to do, or they submit the idea, but someone else does the legwork. And so allowing them the space to do both. So.
Yeah, I hear you saying that, as the school is growing and also you're having more and more students each year, you have certain areas where you've enhanced the amount of structure for students. And although that's likely quite positive, you noted how what teenagers and adolescents just quite naturally do is that when you enhance the structure, sometimes they enhance the pushback. And I hear you saying that you take that pushback and say, we welcome that. Here's the avenue for you to place that is in this course, and not just this course, but in this leadership endeavor of student council, where you voice your feelings about policy. And I also hear you saying there are parameters. You have some of these, boundaries or guardrails that you set as a leader. So it's not necessarily students just inventing policy out of their front pocket. But that within that, there's a space for a voice and a place for them to express their voice. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay. What would your message be to, there'd probably be a lot of messages, but, in many school contexts, climate and culture at a school, it might be really silencing people's voices. You talked about trying to find a place to bring those voices forward. And in many schools, there are students who feel like their voice doesn't matter. And then, as we both know as longtime leaders, that those people who feel like their voice doesn't matter are more likely to be people who've been minoritized, people living in poverty. People from certain groups are more prone to feel that, and not just feel it, but it's more prone to be true for them. What message would you give to somebody who maybe leads a school that's large enough where it feels like student council is not enough to amplify those voices?
Read the room, quite simply, like pay attention, be self and other aware, because anything less is obtuse, like, quite frankly. It is uncomfortable when, as a leader, you spend a lot of time creating, if it's a system or if it's a process or protocol, and to get overwhelmingly negative feedback or any level of resistance from anyone, whether it's a colleague, someone you supervise, or a supervisor. It can feel like, I've worked so hard to do this thing, and it's easy to then defend what you've created instead of see the impact over the intention behind what was created. So explaining the intention, which goes back to the idea of the thing that I struggle with, which is repeating myself. But it's easier to repeat yourself when you are sure of why you did something in the first place. If you just did it to be in compliance with larger district expectations, or if you just did it because it's something that's always been done, it's going to be very difficult to invite someone into your perspective and then give them the space to show what a third way could be. But if you are honest about your intention, honest about the process, honest with yourself about even why you wanted to create that system, it becomes easier to invite people into the conversation. From my experience, for all of my identity markers and the way that they intersect, freedom is the greatest gift that we can give anyone, or the space that we can give them choice, right? A lot of schools talk about college and career readiness, or college or career readiness. The choice is I prepare my kids to do whatever and they get to choose. And so that's the thing that rings true in all of the decisions I make. And so when I have an angry parent in my office about the cell phone policy, I can explain all of the data points that we have in place and also say, this isn't perfect. I would love for you to help come up with a solution that meets the need that you're expressing that you have, and also meets the need that I have to meet within this space to make it an institution that is academically focused, so our kids can have choice between college and career. So I think that that's the biggest suggestion or a piece of advice that I would give is be clear about why you're doing what you're doing, be honest and open about why you're doing what you're doing, and be willing to have someone have a contrarian perspective and you meet them in the most open and humble way that you can.
Let's do one, and you may want to pause and think for a moment when I ask this, but I like to ask people, I used to think, now I think. So when in relation to school climate and culture, either for the climate and culture for adults or students, I used to think, and now I think. And you may have 100 answers to that, but just what, so take a moment and think about.
I used to think it was really simple to build relationships with kids. And now I'm aware that vulnerability is not for everyone. And the most difficult concept for some individuals to understand is this idea of rules and relationship, right? Rules without relationship leads to rebellion, but rules with relationship leads to revolution. And we don't focus on that part enough, right? Of what we can change when we are consistent, when we are clear, and how that impacts the way we build community. Right? I can walk into a room, and I've said this many times to my kids, I love you because you go to this school. You don't have to do anything to earn it, but I do have incredibly high expectations for who you are and who you'll become. And so that's not just the one time they hear me say that in front of all the kids in an awkward auditorium, but if there's moments where I'm doing an observation, there's moments of correction, I typically end what I say with, love you, mean it, have the best day. Because I need them to understand it doesn't matter what you choose or what you do, that being loved is not dependent on that. And for some people, that makes them uncomfortable, or they don't believe in it or agree with it, and that is fine. But I need Black boys, Black girls, Latinx boys and girls, children who are non-gender conforming, however my babies show up, I need them to know that they are loved for who and how they are, and that is not an indicator of what they're able to do, of their potential. So that's the biggest thing. That simple idea makes a lot of people really uncomfortable. And so there are very simple principles that feel more complicated because of the things we carry. So yeah, I used to think it's super, but not for everybody.
It's a great statement. I think, and I would encourage somebody who doesn't feel comfortable with that kind of ethos, that philosophy, and there's different ways to speak it and live it and say it, but I would encourage people to lean into that discomfort, because I'm hoping that we could make that comfortable to speak those kinds of truths to students and to staff members. Thank you so much for your heart, and for your thoughts, and for your leadership. And is there anything that we didn't touch on that it feels like we got a great window into your leadership, but is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to mention?
I think the greatest gift that we are able to give every space that we enter is our true and kind self. And that is a test, but also or the reward in and of itself. I'm learning that our emotions get to be in the car, but they don't get to drive. And in the space and time of cancel culture, it's easy to let emotionality take a front seat. But when we are leading work as tender as children and people, we have to think and be different, which means we have to lean into our superpower, which is the unique combination of gifts that each of us has. So the way that you and I even lead will be different, but when it is truly who and how we are, the impact will resonate. So that's my encouragement, is just to be true and kind.
We hope you gained valuable insight into school climate and culture from the preceding conversation. That was Shakira's leadership perspective. What's yours?